You want me to read this to you?
No.
Hmm? What, you set it up. What do you want to
You told me you wanted to do one of these.
do? What?
Stop. Okay.
I can't hear you, Leah.
Tell me about your childhood.
But didn't we just do that?
Well, you said you wanted to talk about every
I was
one
right.
of these.
Yeah, okay. The top childhood. I was born in 1946 in Birmingham, a little area called Huffman. Huffman was on the outskirts of Birmingham, but it was still in the city. But it was kind of like the country because we had a dairy farm and cow pastures just right down the street from us.
And you worked?
It was country. I had one brother whose name was Ed. He was a half brother actually. His father was killed in World War II, and then my mother married again, and then they had me in 1946. So I was what they called a baby boomer. I was the first of the baby boomers, kids that were grown after that were born after World War II. I liked to play all kinds of sports when I was young. Baseball and football were my favorite sports, and basketball was my least favorite. And we didn't have soccer and lacrosse and some of those sports. They had not come to the South in the 40s and 50s when I grew up down there. I went to the same school, grades 1 through 8. It was called Huffman School. All the grades were in one building. We didn't have kindergarten when I started school. I think there was private kindergartens, but the public schools didn't have public kindergarten. Your mother and father were your kindergarten teacher, and they got you ready to start the first grade. Or in my case, mother and daddy, and my older brother, who was 2 years older than me, taught me the things you normally learn in kindergarten. So in the first grade, I was ready to go. We walked to school back when I was at Huffman School. There were no school buses. The school was probably about 1.5 miles away, so we either walked to school or we rode our bicycles to school. Very seldom did our parents take us. I think in the first grade, I rode my bicycle with my brother to school. And it wasn't like Mama took me the first day of school and cried as I went off to school. It just went to school. I went after that.
Talk about that kid that didn't make it to school.
Yeah, there was one kid, and I think it was like the 5th grade. He was a diabetic, and he used to not take his shots the way he's supposed to, and he'd go into these diabetic comas. And so one morning, he didn't come to school, and I don't think his parents had a telephone, so they couldn't call. But we were concerned maybe he had I think somebody had seen him walking to school, but he never made it to school. So our grade, and maybe a couple of other grades let out, and we all went looking for him in the neighborhood. And we found him. He was in a diabetic coma, and they took him to the hospital, and he finally became okay, and they brought him back to school. But unlike now, so they would never let you leave school and go look for a classmate, but we did. And it was a lot different back then. After the 8th grade, I started playing football in the 6th grade in that little school. I played the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade football at Huffman School. And we played other elementary schools. And we also played a boys' industrial school. And basically that was for wayward kids that were in trouble with the law or had no parents. And it was kind of like a prison for youth, basically. It didn't have fence around it. But they grew their own food, their own cattle. They had their own schools. They lived in big dorms, and that's where we practiced each day our football. We played them one game a year, and of course you could play in the 6th grade, 7th grade, or 8th grade, and so we played what they call their junior high school team. But some of their kids in junior high school in 8th grade, they're probably 19 years old. So if they couldn't beat us by playing better football than us, they just basically beat the crap out of us during the football game. And I always remember playing over there with them. I went on to Banks High School after Huffman School, and I stayed there the first 2 years of high school, the 9th and 10th grade. And as I mentioned before, I played football there. And that's about all I was expected to do was just play football. And the grades were taken care of. If I didn't make the grades, the football coach would go talk to the teacher. The teacher would give me a good grade, and so I didn't have to do anything but play football. And playing football at that school was a year-round sport. You practiced the whole year doing something. And after my sophomore year, I went off. My brother and I both went off to military school, a place called Marion Military Institute in Marion, Alabama. It's about an hour and a half away from Birmingham. I finished up high school there, 11th and 12th grade, and graduated in 1965. And it was also a military junior college, so I stayed on for the first 2 years of college at Marion Military Institute and finished with an associate degree and finished there in 1967. And I went on to Auburn University after there. And while I was at Marion, I met your grandmother, who was going to a Baptist women's college. And so we dated some while I was at Marion. Then when I went to Auburn, she stayed there and finished up. She graduated in 1967. And then 68, I'm sorry, she graduated in 68. And we got married in August of 1968. Then, so my last year at Auburn, we were married, lived in the Married Students Apartments. And your grandmother worked for a place called Diversified Products that sold gymnasium equipment. She worked in the accounting department. And I was commissioned in the Army from Auburn in April of 1969, and we reported for active duty at Fort Sill in June of 1969. And we stayed in the Army until September of 1992.
Didn't even have a car.
A little over 23 years in the
Didn't
Army.
even have a car.
Yeah, and I never had a car the whole time I was in high school or college. Never had a car until we were married, and in Germany I bought my first car. I used to get rides home from college, and I used to hitchhike a lot. We hitchhiked a lot back then. It was safe back then. I wouldn't hitchhike now. But I can remember hitchhiking to school, hitchhiking back, and it wasn't a problem. That's kind of the childhood there. You want to talk about the military next?
Sure.
Okay, as I said, I was in the military for over 23 years, not quite 24 years. June of 69 to September of 92. I was married to Janice when we went in the Army. We went to Fort Sill, first of all, for a short basic officers course. Then we went to Germany for about 2 years. That's when David, your uncle, was born in Germany. And after Germany, we came back to the States, and your grandmother stayed in Atlanta with David, and I went to Vietnam for a year. After Vietnam, if you want to know more about my tour in Vietnam, you read my book, My Time in the Barrel, which is at your house.
Yep. Got it.
It has all kind of stuff in there for you to talk about. And then we went back to Fort Sill for a couple of years. Then we went to Macon, Georgia, where I was in recruiting command. I was in charge of several recruiting stations and recruiters in Middle Georgia. Went back to Fort Sill again. Then we went to Korea. We all went to Korea, and then came back to school at Norfolk Naval Station, and then we stayed in Norfolk, and I went back to Korea for a 1-year tour while they stayed there, and that kind of made up the 23 years we were in the military.
And our mother was born at Fort Sill.
Your mother was born at Fort Sill. David was born in Germany at a military hospital. Your mother was born at Reynolds Army Hospital.
What about Travis?
No, your mother was born at Reynolds Army Hospital at Fort Sill. Travis was born in the Macon County Hospital when we were in the recruiting business.
And then talk about Julie.
And we also adopted our youngest daughter, Julie, when she was a little bit less than 2 when we all lived in Korea.
So she was Korean.
Do what?
She was Korean.
She's full Korean, yeah. She was Korean in a Korean orphanage. We took her out of Korea and adopted her and brought her back. I went in as a second lieutenant and retired as a lieutenant colonel in the artillery. So we lived a lot of interesting places and saw a lot of interesting people and had fun while we did it. Then when I got out of the military, while I was in the military, as I mentioned before, I got a master's degree in management and also a master's degree in education. So I used that degree in education to get a job in Virginia Beach teaching middle school. And I taught 10 years at Kempsville Middle School in Virginia Beach
And you
for
taught.
10 years, and I taught sixth grade. Only sixth grade there, I taught English and science.
Didn't you coach too?
And I coached baseball. I was a baseball coach at the middle school. Then after 10 years, we decided to move to the Outer Banks. And when I went to the Outer Banks, I got a job teaching at First Light Middle School there in Kill Devil
I
Hills.
remember.
And I taught 7 years, plus I was the athletic director at the middle school. But I taught all three grades, sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade. And I taught science, social studies. I didn't teach any English down there, just science and social studies, sixth, seventh, and eighth grades. And in 2009, I decided to retire for good. So I've been retired since 2009.
And now you're here today.
Do what?
And now you're here now.
Now what?
Now you're here.
Now I'm here, yeah. Well, present day, I still go in and substitute a couple times a month back to the same First Light Middle School is all I substitute. I don't go to the high school. So I substitute several times a month. And we travel up here to this house in the mountains, or we live most of the time at the Outer Banks. And so we kind of, your grandmother still sells real estate, and I still piddle around the house, and that's where we are. And now I'm 67, and your grandmother is 39.
Love spending time with our granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like to watch Jeopardy?
Yeah.
When's the last time you watched Jeopardy?
I don't know. Maybe a year ago.
Okay.
Mimi doesn't like Jeopardy, so we don't.
Why doesn't she like
we
Jeopardy?
we don't watch Jeopardy.
Yeah, my substitute, he was on Jeopardy like, I don't know, like 5 times or something. And he won a few times.
Yeah.
Huh.
Do you want to say something to him?
All right.
You can probably beat him at Jeopardy, right?
I don't think so.
I bet you can.
I'm not that smart. Probably about looking, not that smart. Questions?
No.
Huh?
No.
All right, get my
Who's your
book.
favorite granddaughter?
I don't know the other two's names, so I'll have to say Leah.
What about your dog? Talk about
Where
your
we
dog. Hold on.
Yeah, I have a dog named Scoot. Scoot's 12 years old. Scoot's blind. Scoot's,
He's asleep.
I don't bother him. He's asleep.
Daisy's giving you the evil eye.
This is Scoot.
He's
Scoot,
been through
Scoot's a Yorkie.
He's been through a lot too.
He's been through a lot. He was attacked when he was,
Oh, be quiet.
or 4 years ago. And you can see his eyes all messed up. He went blind 4 years ago. But he's a good dog. He's Papa's dog, aren't you, boy?
See, you can be manly with a little dog.
Hmm?
You can be manly with little
Is that all? You done?
Huh? Papa, say something.
Are you done?
Are you done?
No, just say goodbye or something.
Oh.
Bye. Signing off. Over.